The future. The polar ice caps have melted, and the Earth lies below a watery grave. Wait, is this the trailer for Waterworld? It is. Why am I? This is stupid. I'm not reading the rest of this. Welcome to the Film Threat panel live in LA at the Los Angeles Podcast Festival. We have a spectacular show coming up, but first I'm obligated to introduce our host for the show. You know him formerly as film expert from G4's Attack of the Show. He played an assassin on Star Trek Continues. He was featured in documentaries such as The People vs. George Lucas, Doomed, The Untold Story of Roger Corman's The Fantastic Four, and the prequel Strike Back. Writer and producer on my big fat independent movie, Film Threat's founder and chief and editor, Chris Gore. And his co-hosts, who you may know from... no, I've never heard of this guy. Anyway, here's Anthony Ray Bench.
Welcome to the show. Thank you guys for coming in.
How's it going, everybody?
Thank you so much. I am Chris Gore, and wow, what an intro that someone else wrote.
Yeah.
Which I think was you.
Yeah, that was me.
Okay, that's good. And of course, joined by
Anthony Ray Bench.
Anthony Ray Bench. So
bright.
We do a podcast about movies, and occasionally we have guests. We'll have comedians and filmmakers. And I just wanted to collect some of my favorite people from the world of film and comedy, which does have a way of intersecting. So we're going to have a fun conversation. We're going to get to know these people. We're going to get to know their taste in movies.
And judge them harshly upon it.
We'll probably judge them, as I often do when I find out what someone's taste in film is. But I feel like I need to call out the elephant in the room, which is, I wish there was an elephant in this room. Because then I think there would be more of we're expecting a bigger crowd. But noon on a Sunday, you're competing with what? NFL.
Yep.
Whatever anyone's doing on a Sunday.
And apparently there's a big bike race.
Downtown LA now there's a bike race. So for those of you who walked, you were smart. And those of you who lifted or Ubered, probably had to wait. So this is the crowd we've got. We're going to have a fun podcast with just ourselves, having a conversation about film. Now people are starting to trickle in. It sounds much like there's a lot more people here. But let's get right into it. We're gonna because I mean, look, most of the time we're recording in my kitchen.
Yeah.
That's how.
Holy kitchen.
I like my kitchen. It's, if you've seen...
I literally sit right next to the garbage can, and it's one of those ones that has a sensor, so every time I move, it just comes up and just wafts the scent of trash right in my face.
Yeah, it's not I always lie
glamorous. It's very glamorous.
I lie on the show and I say, from our office, and did you go to the reception area? And it's literally my kitchen is where we're recording it, so...
I feel like Grouch Muppet.
Yeah, a little bit. You are, yeah. Oscar,
yeah.
Oscar the Grouch. There you go. Okay, so let's bring up our first guest on the show. I'm really excited. This group runs the gamut all over the map here. But our first guest, hailing from Cincinnati, Ohio, according to the always reliable Wikipedia, you know him from Talk Soup, Queer as Folk, Spider-Man 2, and his Oscar-worthy role in Dude, Where's My Car? Please welcome comedian Hal Sparks.
Right. Oh, yes.
Grab a seat, Hal.
I will, absolutely. I was only born in Cincinnati. This is the nearest hospital without chickens. We lived in Kentucky, actually.
What? So, wow, see, okay, so...
I'm from Peeks Mill, Kentucky, originally, and then Chicago is where I learned to speak like a grown-up, and now here, yeah. Yeah,
so Wikipedia needs to be updated, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's... I have my fair share of Wikipedia saboteurs that have, over the years, made an effort to mess with the history of my life. So I have decided that branding is an idiotic concept and that legend is much better. So it's better to have a legend than a brand. And so I don't care what's right about my past. If people believe it, if it whatever, they're going to make their own decisions about you anyways. So if half of it's bullshit, it tells me more about them than it does about me. So there you go.
So we're going to learn more.
Legend of Hal Sparks on Wikipedia.
We're going to learn more about you on this show than Wikipedia. This is like Wikipedia Live in a sense.
That's right. That's how I describe myself at parties.
So in correcting the Wikipedia or getting to know, what kind of kid were you? Like, what were you like as a kid?
I didn't have a TV till I was 15 because we lived out in the woods. So literally there was no reception. And I watched, the only experience I had was film as far as visual media. My mom knew the guy who owned the movie theater in town, Brighton Park Mall in Frankfurt, which was a good 45 minutes into town. And we couldn't afford daycare. So after school, while my mom's a nurse, she would just drop me off at the theater and I would just watch the same movie over and over again until she picked me up. And so I really fell in love with the idea of being in the industry and then ultimately making films by seeing the same movie 5 or 6 times because you get a different perspective every time you see it. So, and like as a kid, I was super weird. So first book I ever read was The Hobbit. My favorite book is Tao of Physics by Fritjof Capra. And obviously not very Kentucky is my point. So
so what was that like growing up there, being who you were? Like,
you feel like it's all you're an observer. You live life as an observer. You don't feel connected to anything that's going on. You feel like an alien wearing someone else, like Vincent D'Onofrio in Men in Black, just wearing someone else's skin, going, "Had a wonderful cat, wonderful, meant the world to me," you know. But there's an element where I looked at everybody. I was surrounded by like an alien who had dropped in, and was having to pretend to be human. And then as I got to Chicago and then LA, I became, I feel like, oh, this is the right planet.
And when you went to Chicago, was that your family moved to Chicago?
My dad got a job up there. My parents were divorced, and then I just couldn't take Kentucky anymore. So I would have rather lived with my mom. I think at the time I was 14, but I was literally going, I'm going to die if I stay here. This place is a death trap. I'm going to end up pumping gas and miserable and blaming everyone else. So I just decided over the course of a summer that I'm going to Chicago. I'm going to go up there. And luckily, New Trier High School, who should have kicked me out 3 or 4 times.
Why should you have gotten kicked out?
Fighting, all sorts of criminal activity. We're past the statute of limitations. I'm fine. I once had a master key to the school that I had stolen off a janitor's key ring. I snuck in and out of the school at night with friends of mine. New Trier's campus looks like this hotel. It's huge. I went from a class of 100 people in Kentucky to a class of 1,400. Just my class, there were 4,600 kids in my school, my high school. And they had a huge theater department, and so I started, I dove into that. My dad didn't want me to take theater because he thought it was a waste of time in life. And he was like, you'll never get a real job, so I'm not gonna let you take acting. So I intentionally flunked all my electives so that I'd have to take acting as an elective to graduate on time, and it worked. And halfway through my sophomore year, I got my first acting class, and I was working professionally as an actor and as a comedian within a year.
And then when did you relocate to Los Angeles?
16 days after I graduated high school. I packed all my shit in my car and drove to LA. And I had a buddy who was like a co-writer at Second City. I was with Second City when I was in high school. And he and I were going to come out and write together, and sure. So we drove my car out here full of a bunch of shit, got an apartment in Burbank, shared the rent or whatever, and I went away and I got a movie. I got Chopper Chicks in Zombie Town when I was 18 years old, and I went away for a month, and I came back and he hadn't paid the rent and run up a $3,000 phone bill, and all my money from the movie went to pay off the bills, and I was destitute again. Like from scratch, I'd use my last dime effectively to get gas to go to that audition. And then after, I lost all that or whatever. And I was just like, okay, it's gonna suck. Let's just do it then. And after that point, I was totally fearless. I had no worries because I was like, everything's slanted against me. Everybody wants me to lose, so I'll show them,
And when did the Talk Soup gig? Because that's the first time I remember seeing you. Like Chopper Chicks, I want to see that again.
10, 11, almost 10 years to the day. that I got to Los Angeles, like a decade and a half, 1999. So, like 11 years to the day, almost exactly, from my arriving to Los Angeles. I called the 90s the Sisyphus years. Just roll the rock up the hill and watch it roll back down, never get any traction, completely screwed.
But that almost never changes, right? I mean, at any stage when you talk to a lot of people?
No. Once you get famous, you got a grip in that almost no one can pry away.
Right.
It's kind of amazing. And that's why I think there's such a clamor to be famous, and even more than rich. Because rich can go away. You can be poor tomorrow, but you can still be known when you walk down the street. And there's a value in that. There's a marketable, intrinsic value in just simply being known for what you do that can open doors for you. And so anybody who complains about being famous is a complete prick. I have now that doesn't mean that also doesn't mean that I think everybody deserves all the information about celebrities just because they're in the public. Fuck that. I don't believe, I think TMZ are criminals, and I've challenged all of them to a fight. This is still a standing offer.
Really?
And I will fight the entire cast of TMZ in a boxing ring. They can all come in at once. They can wear whatever padding they want, carry any stick weapons they want. I will be in boxing shorts, and that's it. And after I beat up the entire cast, then Harvey can come in. We'll do it all for charity. After I'm exhausted, he can fight me then, and I'll beat him too. And then, but all the money will go to charity. That still stands. I will leave that offer out there every single day. So I don't think the public has the right to know everything about famous people just because their job is public. But I will say that there's a lot of benefits to being famous that you have to understand. You have to have some perspective on. Because somewhere in this world, there's a guy getting his hand chopped off because he swallowed a diamond chip to feed his family for a year. So go fuck yourself.
Right. But the advantage is you probably just walk into any bar that has a line or a part that is,
Totally.
all those little things.
It depends on your work, I suppose.
Right.
I mean, people will scream when you walk into a bar if you're, the bass player Nickelback or some shit. But if you've been on a show like Queer as Folk, or where, because of Lab Rats, because we were the first lead interracial couple in a sitcom. So it's been these second level families, whatever. But Angel Parker and I were the first husband and wife on a regular sitcom, and Disney to their, I'm white, she's black. We didn't talk about it. We just had a life. It was really great. And so you find that you meet people that had an impact on, and those people skulk around like you're in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen or the Buckaroo Banzai regulars, where they're, if you need a lift, they'll give you one. And it's because you've done them a favor. So as long as you're providing a service as an artist, there's an amazing field of human beings who are, because I can't pay back any of the artists I love. There's no fucking way. I could work my entire life for Paul Stanley of Kiss as a personal assistant and never give back to him what I've gotten from his music. I could never give back to the actors and to Peter Sellers. There's nothing I could have done serving him as a servant for the rest of his life when I was alive, that would ever pay back what I got from him. It's just not possible. So people, I think, are intrinsically aware of that, and when you're known and you did something that they liked, there's a tendency to support you.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned earlier about, people's personal lives and gossip and stuff. It's the one thing I just have no interest in.
Right.
Someone had to tell me that Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman were married once, because I didn't know.
Right.
Because I care about what happens on the screen.
That's right.
The personal life. I assume if they're a good actor, they're not like the character they're playing.
Yeah, this isn't called Home Threat.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I'm kind of ignorant of that. It was years ago. I had an offer to do an e-gossip show, and I didn't do it. It was first of all, I don't know anything, and about the people, and then
that doesn't stop them.
It doesn't help. Exactly. They will produce you
it's not necessary to
know stuff. But
right.
But yeah, no, it doesn't interest me. I care about what happens in the movie. Now, if there's some interesting information that is from a person's personal life that somehow is related to the film, and that person's open to talking about, that's a completely different story. But anything else?
Go as far as saying I love behind the scenes drama between filmmakers and actors and stuff like that, like the Harrison Ford Ridley Scott thing for Blade Runner.
I love hearing
stories about that stuff.
Well, there's a whole documentary about
Yeah,
that.
right.
That's interesting. But yeah.
And the weird thing is, as much as a Harrison Ford fan as I am, Blade Runner is my favorite movie, by the way, of all time. As we get into the idea.
Yes.
And insofar as having a guilty pleasure film, I don't believe in having. I don't have them. I have lots of films that people don't like, but I don't give a shit what you think. I don't watch movies with your eyes. I don't listen to music with your ears. I don't have any guilty pleasures because nothing that brings me pleasure should make me feel guilty because of your opinion about it.
Mm-hmm.
The only guilty pleasure I believe that exists in the world is rape. Because if you find pleasure from that, you should be found guilty and placed under a jail. You know what I mean? But this idea that somehow I really like this band and everybody makes fun of me. What is this, high school? Grow the fuck up. Yeah. I don't care, And so I love tons of movies that, people find, chintzy or silly. But I can explain to you 100 Ways to Sunday why I love them and why they're not just good but important.
Well, we'll get into that. But we're going to introduce our next guest.
Yeah.
Okay, our next guest from Owen Sound, Ontario, an alleged city in Canada that sounds completely made up. She's a Jill of all trades, director, producer, writer, and scream queen. Please welcome to the stage, Jessica Cameron.
Grab a seat, grab a microphone, join the conversation.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hello.
And it is not a made-up city. It's actually a real place, but you've probably
I'm not
never heard
buying
of it.
Is it on a bay or some sort of
Yeah,
inlet?
it's on some kind of water.
Hence sound?
Yep, exactly. It's a big town of 21,000 people. Yeah, so I grew up there, so I understand Kentucky.
I was just in Owenton, which is named after the same Ewan family from Scotland, more than likely that Owen Sound
Probably.
is named after.
Now, being from Canada, you're basically from the world's nicest country.
Yes, I like to think so.
So what was that like as, growing up there and then coming here? You had to see a total contrast of how people just...
Fuck you, man.
Well, growing up there, my family loved cars and history, so I spent a lot of time on summer vacations in Detroit, I should say, at all of the Ford museums that they have there. So, and when you're in Michigan as a whole, it's not a really great place.
I'm from there. I can confirm that fact.
People can get a little angry and they can get really scary. Like I'd be in a mall and I'd see fight break out and stuff like that. So that was kind of like my American experience. And then when I first moved to America, I moved to Ohio actually, and they're lovely. The people in Ohio are wonderful people. I was in Columbus, and the saying there was that they're the most Canadian-like of the American people, and it's really clean and really nice. So there wasn't really a culture shock until I moved to LA, and I was like, oh my God, who the hell are you? Like, you're all manipulative, and you have agendas, and filthy, like...
Oh, you should try Dallas sometime, man.
So what brought you to the United States from Canada, which, I mean, that's sort of I guess maybe that's an easy question because there's so much Canadian talent here in the city, but what brought you initially?
I was in fashion design and merchandising, so I got hired right out of university to go run a graphic tees division at a major company that shall remain nameless, and did that for 5 years and hated everything about my life, although I made a lot of money. To the point that my accountant, basically the first review that I had, they were like, we love you, you're great at your job, you're on schedule, your team loves you, but you talk too fast. And I also had a Canadian accent, it's gone now, majorly. But I was like, well, what do I do to fix this? And my boss, who thought it was ridiculous, but it came from her boss's boss, was like, take an acting class and we'll tell them that it's working. Just talk slowly around the stupid people, and that's how we'll get around it. So that's what I did, and I fell in love. And thank God for this acting class, because I was tied into a contract. So when they moved me down, they did like the full everything. They had movers come, pack up my shit, unpack my stuff. It was like $30,000, which at the time was a lot of money. So I was contractually obligated to this company for years. And if I left, I had to pay back all this money that I didn't have. So I found myself just acting evening and weekends and doing everything that I could to feed the creative side of my mind while I did this horrible mundane job that was nothing like my university education led me to believe. And then I started planning my escape from that whole industry. But because I'm a planner, it meant figuring out a budget, figuring out my visa as a Canadian. I can't just be like, I'm going to switch careers. It's not that easy, unfortunate.
One thing I know about you is you are a legit horror fan.
Yes.
I mean, you love horror, live, eat, and breathe. Your horror, like I have your social media feed. It's that comes up. What were you like as a kid, and what made you such a fan of that genre?
You know what? I can actually pinpoint it to, I was at a slumber party when I was 11, and it was like a bunch of other little girls, and we had gotten the movie It, the made-for-TV 1990 version, right? And I not only love the movie, but watching all these, there was like 8 or 9 of us. It was Jennifer Spraggett's birthday party. I don't know what the fuck she's doing now, but I should look it up because it changed my life. And I just remember not only loving the film, but loving how it caused a reaction from the entire group. And everybody had a different reaction. So like some of the girls were scared and refusing to look at the screen. Another one was like, screw this, I'm going upstairs. You know, somebody else was like interested, but like kind of afraid, but not as much as the others. And seeing how they were reacting to what was being played, I felt was really fascinating on a psychological level and also on a fear level, knowing that we're in a basement of a home, her parents are upstairs, we're not in any real harm. It was just really fun for me. It was like a roller coaster, but you didn't have to leave your house. And that's what caused my initial obsession with genre. And then in my home, I wasn't allowed to watch it. So I'd go over to all my friends' house and we'd like rent all the horror movies at like the VHS stores, which by the way, we still have rental stores in Canada, which I think is amazing. We don't have red boxes. They like got kicked out because people couldn't understand the concept. They were like, what's this, going to a box? No. So we would go and rent it, and then I was allowed to read whatever I wanted. So I started to read every single book written by, you know, Dean Koontz, Stephen King, everything. And then I'd source out the movies when I could get a hold of them, and it just became a huge passion.
Isn't that a huge appeal of horror films, though? Is the nature of like, oh, you know, you might not be able to handle this one. And a lot of people that I've had conversations with people in the horror realm, and a lot of it sort of traces back to the Can You Take It, those old traffic movies that they would show you about traffic safety for driver's ed, and they'd have graphic representations of the violence that would occur.
On the highway.
Yeah, all of those, and that's the appeal of horror movies is like, will you be able to take it? Will you keep your eyes open? And the pleasure you derive from watching the reactions from your audience. So that's funny. You picked up on that like right away. What made you? Obviously, you came to Los Angeles here, and you're not just an actress on screen. You're also a director and a producer. And, you know, there's been a lot of talk about the Directors Guild is not a particularly diverse group in this town. So as a female director in indie film, what are the things challenges that you come up against? Are there ways where in some ways it helps? I don't know. I can't be in your brain, but if you could just give us a sense for a moment of being a director in that genre.
Well, it's tricky. So there's automatically, as a woman in this industry, still to this day, and I do think it's getting better, and we have to fight and stand up and be as good as our male counterparts and not rely on the fact that we're women or that we're underrepresented to get the roles and get the jobs, in my humble opinion, right?
Yeah.
Which I feel like that's a bit of a problem. Like, so many people are not wanting to do the work and just being like, you should hire me because I'm a woman. No, you should hire me because I'm the best fucking person for the job. And you should absolutely make sure that you're going out of your way to try and get 50% applications to be women for the job. And then the job should go who's ever best qualified. That being said, about 20 to 25% of the rooms I walk into, although I'll get into the rooms, they don't take me seriously because I'm just that girl, right? Or they're like, oh, aren't you cute? You're so pretty. You know, they just don't understand. And there's definitely like this hierarchy where I have to fight to get the same things that my male contemporaries get, and they get them handed to them because they're men. In a lot of the situations, like I've literally played film festivals. I've now directed 3 feature films. The 3rd one's in post. And most of the people that I did screenings with for my first film, Truth or Dare, a lot of the time my movie would win an award. They would go on to get a much higher budget or a studio film for their second one. Although I could get some of those meetings, I have yet to get that. So again, it's acknowledging the fact that it's not the same. It's fighting to make it different. And also saying, you know what, fuck that. You're not going to keep me down. If you're not giving this to me, I'm going to go get it somewhere else. It's fighting to make sure that we can tell our stories and tell the way that we want to. Something that I really love when you watch my films, everyone tells me they'd never know it was directed by a woman. And so although that statement could be taken offensively, I think it's great that people are realizing that you're right. There's no fucking way to tell who directed it. Like, you're watching it as an audience member. You know, it shouldn't be, oh, this is a woman's film, this is a man's film. It's a fucking film. You either like it or you don't. So it's fighting to tell that.
I want to find out for a second if I have a lot of weird opinions about things. I want to find out if I'm a crazy person for a second. But it used to bother me when I first started going to film festivals when I was a kid, basically. And it would bother me that they would have the film festival and then here's the women's movies. Or they would do this in Detroit. Here's the women's films and then the black filmmakers. And that just would bother me. I'm like, why aren't they just the filmmakers? Why do they have to... Does it bother you when certain groups are marginalized in those circumstances? Is that, I understand the purpose. The purpose is to help support filmmakers from various groups move ahead, but are we actually... What's that?
Showcase them.
Yeah, showcase them, but does it do them a disservice by marginalizing? Because I would go to those festivals and those would be the lowest attended. Although I say this in a room with 300 seats and only half the seats are full. So, but like, does that, am I crazy for thinking that?
It bothers me endlessly. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's sexism. Whether you're selecting women and promoting them over men, whether you're selecting men and promoting them over women, it's still sexism. We are all filmmakers. We should be judged accordingly. I don't think we do service to the films, and a film festival, in my humble opinion, needs to do service to the movies. And when you separate it by race or sex, you're not doing that. Right. So for me, the best thing we could do is be like, this film is great for the following reasons. It's not about who's behind the camera in any capacity other than maybe they're the best person for the job because they're so passionate and they grew up watching horror movies. So they're bringing all of that to the table. But again, sex, race, religion has nothing to do with your ability to make a film. And I think when you segregate it, you perpetuate the fact that you're different and that there is a difference and there should be one, whether you mean to be or not. I think a lot of these people are not intentionally trying to keep women at a lower place, but when you do things like that, I think that's what you are, in fact, helping to do.
And to be clear, that opinion came from sitting at the kids' table during Thanksgiving dinner, and they separated the kids and the adults, and that used to annoy me as a kid. And
Until you were an adult and you were trying to eat.
Yes,
right?
now, yeah.
Can we move these kids? Please.
But wait, no, but now as an adult, I can sit at the adult table. I actually prefer to sit to the kids' table. I find that we have conversations.
As the other adults.
Yeah, exactly. They want to get away.
Right.
They want to get away. Well, thank you for helping us get to know you for a moment. I want to bring up our next panelist because this is packed, folks. Jam-packed. Jam-packed. Next up, we have a very special guest. From Altoona, Pennsylvania, he's the man responsible for putting Gwyneth Paltrow's head in a box and many more things film students across the country are forced into overanalyzing. He's the screenwriter of Seven, Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, 2010's The Wolfman, and the animated feature Nerdland. Give a well-deserved special welcome to Andrew Kevin Walker.
Hello.
Hey, Andy.
Hi, buddy.
Welcome to the show.
Hi,
Welcome to the
everybody.
show.
Hi.
Cool.
Nice to meet you.
So what was it like growing up in Pennsylvania? Did you drink Iron City beer? That's the thing I remember from...
We weren't that close to Pittsburgh. I'm sure I could have gotten that beer if I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
It was cool. I'm from Altoona like for a year or two, and then I moved to Mechanicsburg, which is near Harrisburg. It was great. I mean, it was kind of, close to the country, close to Harrisburg. So there were a lot of movie theaters. So it was fantastic. I studied film at Penn State, wasn't exactly NYU or UCLA, but, you make the most of whatever opportunity you can find. Penn State just happened to have an amazing screenwriting teacher there at the time.
And when you were a kid, like, how did your mom drop you off at a movie theater to binge watch one movie all week, or did you? I find that really fascinating, Hal.
It happens sometimes. I mean, my experience of what Hal's talking about was when Prism, kind of the Pennsylvania version of HBO came, and since they only had a few titles, they just played. They played Alien often, which was great. They played And Justice for All, which I've probably seen more than anyone in the world because I watched it every time it was on. But yeah, I mean, because you were going to ask about like kind of seminal movies or movies that were kind of an epiphany for each of us. I remember going and like trying to stay to watch Disney's Island at the Top of the World for the third time, which had a Winnie the Pooh featurette attached to it too, which made me really happy. But, or Herbie the Love Bug and stuff like that. But yeah, there was a time when you would go to the movies and you would just go like, okay, 20 minutes, the lights are up, and they go back down, you watch it again immediately.
And where do you think, I always, especially, I should say, I have a brief speaking part in Nerdland. Thank you for...
Thank you.
Thank you for having me be... It's that movie I find so strange. Originally, and just weird from the standpoint, it's for movie geeks, but it's also these characters that, like, they're seeking out fame at any cost. It's Patton Oswalt does the voice, Paul Rudd are the two leads, and it's...
Yeah, Kate McCucci, Ricky Lindholm, Lorraine Newman. It's an amazing cast, all due to Chris Pernosky and his wife, Shannon, who created Titmouse Inc., who do a lot of the adult animation, Adult Swim animation. That was just one that I wrote forever ago, like everything that I've written. We happened to get it made because we paid for it ourselves, and Titmouse put in a ton of sweat equity. But it was kind of... when I wrote it, I was saying this is going to be every working assistant's or person who's trying to break into Hollywood's favorite scripts, because we all moved to town and we tandem park in these weird apartments that between like concrete girders and go up to our little townhomes if we're lucky that have like 2 floors, and we all eat around the corner in Los Feliz or Atwater Village or whatever and work in the mailroom, and it was about that desperation. My roommate at the time was trying out some acting and had some headshots for commercials, and I was trying to be a screenwriter. I still am trying, and so it's about that, trying to get your foot in the door. I don't think a lot of people have seen Nerdland. It's on Netflix now. I love it. I especially love it because the animation is fantastic and the cast is incredible from top to bottom, including you. But it's a weird movie, and we got it made by sheer kind of force of will and micro budget.
But it's because it does, yeah. But it does have that feel of like, that experience of first moving here and trying in some way to make it. And what were your experiences with that? They say screenwriters live in their head, right? All the other jobs on production, whether it's TV or film, you're working with a lot of people. But in screenwriting, there's meetings and then go do the thing.
Well, I don't begrudge that I haven't seen a lot of movies or read a lot of books, because you're always having to read, at least since I've been a working screenwriter, because you're always having to read what's a possible job. And if I go to see movies, I haven't finished my assignment in the 3 months that I was given to write it. But although there is time for that stuff in the massive amount of procrastinating I do. But I think the breaking in part, like I said, I went to Penn State. There wasn't a lot of outreach to Penn State to, Julius Epstein, who wrote Casablanca, was a Penn State alum. I remember Tom Savini, one of my favorite makeup artists, came and lectured. That was off the hook incredible. But from Penn State, I went and lived in New York City for 5 years. That was kind of the marinating out of which came Seven, my love letter to New York City. I've said it many times. Breaking in, quote unquote, as a writer, I always say that there's more rejection. The only thing that is more face-to-face rejection, career-wise, is being an actor. And there's a nice close second amongst screenwriters. But at least with screenwriting, you don't have any audition. You can go and write something. And when that doesn't sell, you can go and write something else. And, you can keep doing that. The palette for actually getting the movie made is enormously expensive, but being able to write whatever you want, write your way out of unemployment, that's always a possibility, I think. Although it's harder than ever, I think, to get movies made.
Teach me your ways.
Well, with Seven, how many times a week does someone say, "What's in the box"? Do people make "What's in the box" jokes? Does that happen?
I hear it sometimes, and see a little
birthday,
like a little box at Skylight Books that has a picture of Brad, and it says "What's in the box," and it's bookmarks or something. I'm just happy that people remember the movie, and in my opinion, it's entirely due to David Fincher, and that, again, and another amazing cast, an alignment of, like, you know, stars aligning, planets aligning, so that movie got made with the integrity that it got made, and remained whole unto itself without having its ending kind of disassembled and ruined.
And we've never talked about it, but I want to ask, what was that whole experience like? Was it, you know, through the making of it, but then also, like, at the end when it became a huge hit? I remember seeing it in the theater opening weekend with just a stunned audience. That, I mean, what was it like after that? Does that suddenly, you're hot, and then how do you? What was? It
was the one that they can never take away from me. I'm happy with it beyond compare, as you can imagine. It was an incredible experience. Those 2-3 years, you couldn't have slapped the smile off my face, because when you're making it, all you're hoping is that it gets finished and made and then gets released. You know, there was a moment where Brad fell and cut his hand really badly, when it seemed like it might not get finished, but it did get finished. It was also if I didn't cross paths with David Fincher, I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be, you know, in front of this huge audience. Hello, everybody.
How did you?
It's my kind of audience. Like, it makes me really happy
And how did you cross paths with him? You said cross paths. Is that how the script got?
Well, I'm not going to take all afternoon to tell the long story of, like, there was like 5 years where the script was optioned, and then the company that originally had it, I rewrote it entirely for Jeremiah Chechik, who was going to direct it, the guy who did Christmas Vacation. I completely ruined the script in just, you know, kind of dutifully, you know, my first job basically in Hollywood, following his notes. And I ruined it. I mean, I wrote it, but then again, and I've talked about this with people recently, and it's a really, really hard decision to make as a screenwriter. Am I going to sit here and fulfill the director's vision, or am I going to, which I do a lot of now, kind of say, you know what, go do it however you want, Joel Schumacher, and I won't probably ever go see the movie. But if I hadn't stuck around and ruined the script, I wouldn't have been around later when the company had some financial hard times, and Arnold Kopelson came in, and then they brought in David Fincher. So I wouldn't have been there in that meeting. There would have been some other, you know, second or third screenwriter down the line who would have had the chance to kind of, and just very briefly, the only reason David saw the script that I had originally written, basically the first draft with that ending, was because it was accidentally sent to him. They sent him the old draft, and then they said on the phone, like, so what do you think? Do you want to meet about this? And he said, blah, 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 you know, the head in the box. And they were like, oh, no. Oh, we sent you the wrong draft. And then they sent the draft that I had rewritten, and he was like, oh, I don't want that. So he's the one that saved it, along with Mike DeLuca at New Line, and Kevin Spacey, and Morgan and Brad, and all the people who fought for it. But again, it was just hair's breadth, if that's the expression, one direction or the other, and I'd still be working at Tower Records if only there was still Tower Records.
Right, yeah. There's Amoeba.
It's such a happy accident. It really is. Like,
and you're right, I can go to Amoeba when I need to and apply. I could sell laser discs.
I just, now I can't get out of my head the idea that in the box at one point was green Jell-O with cat food in it. And then there was a scene with Morgan Freeman drinking eggnog out of a moose's head going, it's good, which is a Christmas Story reference, Christmas Vacation reference.
It had a tableau of a burnt out church with Seven Deadly Sin kind of paintings in the burnt out church. There wasn't a head in the box. You know, there was many times through the,
it was a Criminal Minds episode,
of
basically,
development. And there were times when they say, well, box arrives, and it's a TV that shows that his wife is in danger, but he still goes and saves her. So,
wasn't it at one point a dog's head?
Maybe. It might have been.
Yeah.
But it's,
again, a legend is more important than a brand.
Yeah. Great. Well, let's bring up our next panelist.
Which one's that, Chris?
Oh, it's on the second page of this. There you go. Right. Just,
Yeah, point it out.
yeah, right there.
Okay, all right. All right, our next guest, he's one of the funniest comedians on the planet. Hands down the filthiest. He's edited some of your favorite adult films in your collection, especially if you're into tranny porn. Here's Yoshi Obayashi.
Thanks for coming to join us, Yoshi.
Hey, Chris.
Now, I actually know a lot about you because we've been friends for years and done shows together and whatnot. You've even been on my old podcast, Podcrash. But for the purposes of the audience here, you were an unusual kid. I'm just gonna say you're an unusual kid, just straight up. Like you had a strange sense of humor from when you were young. Can you?
I think he's trying to set you up for a story.
Trying to set you up for a story. There's actually one story in particular I know that I know it's part of your act, but it's such a great story. When you
Which one?
Which you went to the
Which one, Chris?
It sounds like a setup. but-
No, just the Pearl Harbor story. The with your yeah.
So, 1979, my dad decided to take the whole family from Japan to continental USA. My grandmother was dying from cancer. She was getting treatment in Seattle, Washington at the time. So my dad decided to go Hawaii first because it's the midpoint between the two places. So for some odd reason, my dad decided to take myself and my younger brother to Pearl Harbor, Arizona Memorial. And so I'm translating from Japanese to English. He says, son, you don't speak English, but do not panic. I'm going to abandon you. That's very reassuring coming from my dad because this is the first time we're traveling to overseas. So as we were sailing Pearl Harbor to Arizona Memorial, all my dad tells me is a bunch of airplane flew over Pearl Harbor, bombed them, and took off. He doesn't tell me the Japanese people did it. He forgot that part. So soon as we land at Arizona Memorial, my brother and I, we both start acting like airplane and start running around in the place, bombing the place. And this is 79. So rightfully so, white people are getting very upset. And my dad just ran away from us like he didn't know us because we were the only Asian people there. So yeah, there's actually a picture of, somebody took a picture of us and my dad just looked frightened the whole time. But odd, uncomfortable humors, I guess, yeah.
So you move from
The trip to Nanjing must have been hysterical.
Yes.
so then your family moved here from Japan, right? And you moved to Seattle initially.
Well, I think 6 months after that, my grandmother passed away, and that's when my mom saw an opportunity to get divorced. And that part she didn't tell me and my younger brother. So we flew from Osaka, Japan, and we were supposed to fly into Tokyo. The next day we woke up in Hawaii. That's when my mom told us that they're divorced, and she left me and my younger brother to my aunt living in Seattle. And then, yeah. It's like Asian people never tell you. They're very evasive about truth, because truth make everyone comfortable. So, like for example, my grandmother, she had a cancer. No Asian doctors would tell the patient that they have cancer. So, no, I mean, because they make that person feel bad because they have cancer. They'll tell the rest of the family, that she has a cancer. So I think that's one thing I really appreciate about the West. Like, you could say however unpleasant, however terrible joke it may be, the Westerners tend to have great respect for honesty, very unpleasant. And I really appreciate what you said about guilty pleasure, because I think whenever people say, the critics say, something is good taste or bad taste, but I just think for most people, the bad taste is the norm, I think. That's why we have President Trump, And, and I don't think you should apologize. If you like something, you should love whatever you like, I don't have a lot to add because these are people with actual credits. But I will say, I think we had talked this before. Like when you go see movies, like when I was a kid, Return of the Jedi, there was a sense of communal feeling, wasn't it? Isn't it great? Like you want to see it over the weekend because Monday when you see your friends, you want to talk about that. we have a very. Have you noticed we're getting less and less of that? And
You're talking about like
Game of Thrones,
like mainstream culture is not as. I mean, there used to be popular music. Now music is just so divided. You know,
Everybody wants to be alternative. It's
Right.
it's revolution as norm.
right.
You know, is everybody wants to be the revolutionary or the rebel, so much so that everybody's just lonely. It's just essentially like, I want to be a tribe of one, so I stand out, and then you're in LA is a city of tribe of one. You know, so absolutely. But I do think there is a resurgent, because, like you said, Game of Thrones. I don't know who said that out loud, but there's this idea that's becoming the kind of Monday morning, did you see last night, water cooler moment, which is kind of cool, but you experience it alone. It's very
long.
Yeah, it's a
like watching porn. You know,
It's a
very lonely thing.
Speak for yourself.
Yes,
I mean, we have big watching parties at my house, you know, because it's the only way. That way, nobody can judge me, because we all watched the same goddamn thing and had the same reaction.
But you know, movies like Return of Jedi, and for me, 2001, even after you watch it, it really expands your imagination, right? And technology is great, but it does make me sad when I really find the value of daydreaming, but these days kids don't do that anymore, because anytime they have a free time, they get their cell phone. I think daydreaming is really important, because whatever the personal problem you might have or some creative block, that moment gives you you know what I mean, like a little bit of inspiration. Newton daydream, that mathematical formula, Einstein, and I'm sure that but you don't do that anymore. And even dreaming, a lot of people binge watch. I'm guilty of it too. But sometimes you fall asleep watching. It's 2 a.m. I will just watch one more episode. But I think you're watching it, you'll fall asleep, and that, like, I don't think watching Breaking Bad's good binge watching middle of the night, because I have a terrible nightmare afterwards, you know. But not having dreams and daydreaming, I don't know where we're going with this thing, you know. And of course, I edited porn for 9 years. I worked in Dave Soul porn for Dave Attell.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Like, what led you from, because you became an editor and then you edited adult films, which are films because they're lit and shot and edited in the same process, mostly the same process, and you learned a lot about that. And then
the only form of film, by the way, that has an important continuity issue is that everything must happen in a certain order, especially the ending.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can't cinema verite porn. Like, you can't start at the end and work your way backwards. How did he get to the idea of coming in the first place?
But it's weird that way. I mean,
because he's right. Because when it comes to porn movies, most people never say the book is better. You know? And,
but it's weird because I mean, pretty much all porn films are a series of Mad Libs where you kind of know what goes in the blanks, right? There's the correct order.
That's a horrible way to refer to it.
Yes, that's horrible.
The genitalia.
It's just okay. I didn't see that. I didn't see that one coming. But I think we just keep it going. I don't know.
I think the HBO's doing a great job with Deuce, because I think a lot of younger people forget there was actually some artistic merit earlier. You know, like late 60s and 70s, maybe
late
even
70s especially. Porn in theaters. Absolutely. Remember that if your grandparents are in their 70s, they saw porn in a theater with other people.
Yeah. Henry Kissinger went to the premiere, Johnny Carson, you know, but movies like Curious Yellow in Sweden, I think those kinds of movies actually help. There's some kind of interesting connection. When more people watch porn, they tend to be more have a positive image of gay people. I don't know what's the connection, but I keep hearing it over and over. But it does have a negative attitude about objectifying women, for sure. You know.
It's interesting because, I mean, we've had whole bizarre conversations about porn, which maybe we should do a porn episode of Film Thread at some point, but you have some...
Technically impossible to have a bizarre conversation about porn. Because it is so outside the norm of expectation as far as conversation that it will always be off mark from normal conversation.
I don't know. There's so many things now that
it's supposed to be.
So many things now that I think we would think in a situation are abnormal, but now they're just normal because
You're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. But with me with porn, I know the cinematographers. Andrew Blake is famous. Michael Nin also, and you're one of the people I know I can have that conversation. Well, the cinematography for this one is pretty good. But
I'm friend with Bill Lustig, and he was telling me before he did Maniac Cop, as a young teenager, he wasn't supposed to, but he was working in porn production in New York City, and that actually gave him quite a bit of a training, filming and editing. They actually edit for porn,
and Francis Ford Coppola also famously made, and then Sylvester Stallone was in an adult film. I mean, there's a lot of
Craven.
starts. Yeah,
go ahead.
The last thing I was saying, I know what I like about two things. One, I met a lot of interesting people that you would never meet because I have no credits, but as soon as they are here, I work in adult business. I'm not going to mention names, but there's a cabinet man from Obama, he started talking to me just because I work in a business, and the last thing I would say, porn, that's a funny way of predicting who's going to be president. Because in 2008, most popular porn was interracial porn, so I figured Obama was going to win. In 2000, 2004, the most popular adult movies were like what we call torture porn. They're really mean and physical. So people are asking me, what was the porn that was so popular in 2016? It's called incest porn. And they call it taboo relations, but, the things that Trump said about his daughter is really creepy, but it's it's absolutely the most popular thing right now, and I don't know why that trend has moved that direction, but I think a lot of my friends in the business were saying they were predicting Trump. But the only nobody take porn people seriously. So
I think then we should really push for like geriatric tea time porn. You know what I mean?
I like the way you think.
Yeah, so that by the time the next election rolls around, it's just like sensible people having sensible sex. So we get back to a normal order of business.
But you've been privy to some interesting statistics in the United States about people's consumption of adult content, and one of the things was what adult search terms were most searched by geographic region. Yeah. And I remember you told me a couple really fascinating things that perhaps you'd share with us. The most searched terms, say in California versus Alabama versus other states.
I think I think
was that at the search terms of the most popular?
My friend is professor at Harvard. His name's Ogi Ogas. He wrote a book called Billion Wicked Thoughts, and he did this research where billions of research throughout the world. So if you're Asian, Black, Latino, Middle Eastern, it doesn't matter. There's a full body parts that men always search in internet, and there's always the same full body parts when they're searching for,
What are they?
Well, you guys want to make a guess? Yeah.
Breasts.
Yes, that's one. Yeah. There's a reason too, but.
Ass, vagina.
No. Ass, but no, vagina is not one of the top four.
Mouth.
No.
Oh.
Getting closer. Feet.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because it's more specialized. It isn't. I'm going for what normal porn tends to bifurcate down into smaller and smaller. Especially, the
last ones are very tricky, but I work in the business.
Nape of the neck. Am I telling too much about myself? Is that wrong? Going back through my own.
But the
fourth one is dick. It doesn't matter heterosexual or gay men. I don't want to be cruel, but. They research movies like Little White Chick, Big Black Monster Dick. It's not because men are into penis. They're anticipating women's reaction to large penis. So dick is always popular, in addition to feet, ass, and tits. And this is a reason why in the business we call erotic optical illusions. That's why transsexual movies are so popular. Gay men are not into transsexual movies at all. It has all four major parts: feet, tits, ass, and dick. So
the four food groups of porn, in a way.
That's why if you flip too fast through the LA Weekly when you're looking for a concert, you just go straight for the big color ads, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not what I'm looking for. It's because those are the ones who can afford a big color ad, like a quarter-page ad of oh, hello,
I don't think we will need a need for pornography if people are able to have honest conversation about it. But I don't think they can. And I work at a retail shop for 4 or 5 years, and you know how Apple have Genius Bar? Well, we were like the pervert bar, and
Genius bar.
yeah, and I never judge them because these are people with like. My friend called pornography control intimacy, which doesn't make any sense. Intimacy is you're opening yourself to somebody else. These are the people that are not able to do that. But at least when they used to have porn shop, they could go and have an actual conversation with us. But now it's even more lonely for them. You know, they're just online. But I think usually it's guys that are having hard time connecting with people. You know, and I don't like men harassing women, but for many of these guys. When I hear their problems, what they're looking for, like a lot of the guys get oral sex tape because their wife or girlfriend stopped doing it and they don't want to cheat. So this is what they get for supplement like a vitamins or something, you know? And like, I was a young kid, I'm listening to all the stories. I don't know what to say to them, but yeah, I wish there's more honest stories. I think men and women need to have that. That's why transgender people are awesome because they've been on the both sides. They're the most honest people, transparent. That's a great show, you know.
And what led you to leave, editing adult
I got
movies?
fired.
Yeah, oh, okay. Well, that actually would make you to leave.
Yeah.
I mean, but were you doing comedy then before? I'm trying to remember when you
I always
jumped into comedy.
I moved to LA, but for entertainment. But basically, I was running away from my problem. I wasn't getting along with my family in Seattle, so I moved down here. But I wasn't trying to get in adult business. They had a sign that they were looking for DVD producer at the convention, so I just applied. I just happened to be the only one applying. So I ended up working at Dave's Old Porn. Maya Rudolph called me for her husband, Paul Thomas Anderson's 40th birthday. I'll get 2 porn girls for them. He was very embarrassed. So people call me all the time for anything the adult theme. And I just finished working on a documentary called Porndemic. That's the working title. And it's about HIV outbreak 20 years ago in LA. And everything I thought I knew what happened, I was wrong about that. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting how I've seen you in your career kind of pop up, with a lot of.
Okay.
No, I mean, like with just the diverse group of people that you know at all levels. You just seem to have no qualms about walking up to anybody and getting into a conversation that.
But they usually
I don't know,
ask
you just,
me,
Yeah.
But my friend worked for that Nazarian family. They're the richest Persian Jews in Beverly Hills, and they wouldn't even talk to me. These are people who support the Prime Minister of Israel, and they donate to Clinton and stuff like that. And they didn't want to talk to me. But as soon as they found I worked for Evil Angel and whatnot, these are billionaires. They have so much question, but they're whispering because their wives and girlfriends in the same room, But yeah, people are just curious, and if they talk to me, I'll talk to them, Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for talking to us. And I'd like to bring up our next panelist.
Excellent segue.
So, yeah, exactly. Our next guest is a native to Los Angeles, California. His widely read social media feed, Verbal Riot, is blowing up, a writer of several now-defunct pop culture blogs, and more importantly, a former driver for exotic dancers and other questionable Hollywood types who also do morally questionable things for money. Here's Dante James. Woo!
So if any of us need a lift home, we're in good company.
Grab a chair. Grab a chair. We'll have to share microphone. We'll have to share a microphone. But
I feel like I'm like the civilian of this group.
Well, no. I mean, we met. This is first of all a funny story about how we met. I was in the middle of an alley in Pasadena. Wasn't it?
We met at Lucky Baldwin's in Pasadena.
That was it. Okay,
Yes.
good. But there was, So then, what? So I don't know. We've been friends now.
It's been a while, actually.
Yeah.
So high.
But also high.
It's Lucky Baldwin, so a lot of beers were involved here.
Yes. But okay, so there was that. But it's so rare to even meet a native Los Angeles person because here we have a panel of people that all I'm getting out of where I'm from and coming
And
to
I was
LA.
born in hell.
Yeah, exactly. So what? I mean, as a native Los Angelian, how do you feel about this influx of immigrants that come from other places to?
I mean, look,
Your homeland.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm from here, but I've obviously traveled the country, so I know that there's worst places to live. I'm not naming names. But look, this is where this industry is. And, me and my friends used to always say, like, if you were, the best-looking woman in Omaha, do you stay the best-looking woman in Omaha, or do you move to LA and try to do something with that, right? So obviously, people who have something going on for them are probably going to move to either here or New York, some metropolitan big city.
Right. But you didn't have to move.
I didn't have to move. I was born and raised here. It's funny. I was born and raised here. I grew up in like the hood. I mean, like that. I don't know if you saw the movie Colors with Sean Penn, but like that was my neighborhood. And I remember growing up that we didn't have, like, you were either a gangbanger, a baller, or a nerd. I fell between baller and nerd, but more on the nerd side. I could play basketball enough, but compared to most black guys, I'm pretty bad. So, I just spent most of my time reading comic books and watching movies and kind of going into that world, because it was either that or going outside, and my chances of coming home were probably 50-50. So.
And reading comic books, we were just having this discussion before the panel. I found it weird when I was a kid reading Captain America and the Falcon, which is one of my favorite comics from the 70s, but that every time there would be a black character in a comic, the character would be Black Panther, Black Lightning, Black whatever.
Yeah.
How is that? I mean, when you were a kid, did you like that those characters? Did you finally go, this is kind of bullshit? Like, what?
You know what? At that time, when those books came out, we were just happy to have a black character in a comic. I mean, we didn't have a lot going for us. I look at Comic-Con and people, who do cosplay, and, you see the white people, they can dress as whoever they want because there's so many characters that they can identify with and dress as. But growing up, we had 2 or maybe 3 that we could actually identify as. We were either Black Panther, who wore a mask all the time, Luke Cage, and you have to wear a yellow blouse to be him. And I think that might have been all we had.
Black Lightning or Black Vulcan?
Yeah, we didn't identify with Black Vulcan because, no, and the reason why is because, I'm just going to say it, especially back then, black culture was kind of homophobic, and Black Vulcan wore the weird leotard,
I got you.
So we couldn't really dress like him, Luke Cage was even pushing it with the blouse. So
yeah, the tiara.
Yeah, and the tiara. Jesus. Anyway, forgot about that.
I always thought Luke Cage was cool because he had the chains.
Well, that's
the
what
chains
made,
is the bracelets.
Made him manly.
Cool.
If he didn't have those chains, he just had the yellow blouse and the tiara.
And the chest hair.
Yes.
Chest hair too.
So anyway, yeah, I grew up just, and that was my world because I couldn't really go outside my house to have a world, so.
And what got you into writing as a kid? Just like.
Well, my first, I guess, introduction into any of this was, I remember I was working on a lot of student films at USC with a friend of mine. And he told me that, I had a look and I should probably audition for this thing. And he knew this guy who was casting at this really weird office in Hollywood. You guys know where the big mall is in Hollywood now? The big mall. The Highland Mall.
Okay, yeah, the Highland Mall.
Well, the Highland Mall didn't used to be there. Before the Highland Mall, there was just some shady-ass offices that were there. And a lot of dope deals were going on. A lot of other weird shit was going on there. So, but anyway, he told me that they were auditioning for this part and that I had to look and I should go check it out. So I go and I'm like, but dude, I don't have an agent or anything. He's like, dude, it's an open audition, just go. So I go and, I guess they were casting for, a gangbanger type. And I'm like, okay, if it pays, whatever. I was only 19. So I go and I sit in this weird room with these people staring at me. And they're just like, well, we need you to be tough. I'm like, what do you mean be tough? They're like, well, we need a gangbanger. I'm like, what do you want me to do? Like, shoot you? What do you want me to do? Anyway, the audition went terrible. I talked to my friend after and said, dude, where did you send me? And he's like, yeah, they were casting for the Rescue Diaries. And I'm like, why do they need a gangbanger for the Rescue Diaries? And that just kind of weirded me all out. I'm like, I don't think I'm built for acting. But I love movies. I loved, TV. I loved, and I was a very creative guy, and I wanted to indulge in that. So, and I was a terrible student. Especially for a writer, it's like I got D's and F's in English all the time. But I felt like, I had something to say, and, maybe that's something I should pursue. The problem is, when I started that, I kind of got sidetracked with, becoming a driver for the exotic dancers. That world, no, and it's you guys have to understand, this company specifically catered to the Hollywood area, specifically higher types in Hollywood. So my boss's client list is insane, and like I've had to bring girls to some of the biggest stars, and they were just dancers. I know people always say, well, maybe they were hookers. Like, no, when they drove with me, they weren't. They were just dancers. Because if we ever got arrested, or if they ever got arrested, then I'm no longer the driver. I'm the pimp, and I go to jail. So I made sure they were just dancing. But like I remember one time I was doing extra work on 90210, and random. And I remember, hanging out with, it was weird. Like, I didn't follow the rules of the extra, because I didn't care. I didn't give a fuck whether they fired me or not, because I wasn't supposed to be there anyway. So I would go talk to the stars, and, I didn't care if they said, you got to go. But apparently the stars liked me. I would talk to, like, Ian Ziering and Brian Austin Green. And I remember the weirdest thing is, like, we did this set, we filmed. And then a few weeks later, like, because I was still driving at the time, a few weeks later, I got called to bring two girls to a party. It turned out to be, they were there, Brian Austin Green and Ian Ziering. And it was just this weird kind of like, we're looking at each other like, hey, man, it's good to see you. I'm like, yeah, good to see you guys too. And they're like, so you're the guy. I'm like, I do this at night kind of thing. And they were just like, okay. And so you could tell like they were trying to be on their best behavior, because I think they were going to cut up. If it was another drive, they probably would have went buck wild, because I've heard about them doing weird shit. But anyway, but they were on their best behavior that night. Like they were totally like, the girls were dancing and they were just in their corner kind of like, drinking their
touching.
Yeah, their punch, and they weren't doing a damn thing. But it was just this funny thing where having this job, I've had to like encounter a lot of pretty big names during the 90s, if that even counts. But yeah, so I was in this weird Hollywood world, but, I wasn't actually in the world. Like, I wasn't working in the business, but, I'm hanging out with a lot of big name people doing weird shit. So, partying with
like... my production company, by the way.
Like, I remember, like, just times where, like, I was, I ended up in the bathroom with, I'm not going to say, well, let's just say she was on Charles in Charge, and she was just doing coke in front of me, and she's just like, you don't mind, do you? And I'm just like, I guess I don't. I kind of have to piss, though. So it was just like this, it's just a weird, bizarre life, and, you would think that, with all this stuff going on, like, I'd have something to write about, but it took me a long time to really start writing. Like I felt like I was very insecure, I was very, I didn't think I could really pull it off. Like I wrote a script for my first time maybe 20 years ago, and I shopped it around, and even that was like kind of a big deal for me. And I learned that I was a much better content writer, much better blog writer, because I could use my own voice. I could tell my own, stories that sound more like me rather than being a screenwriter. Because I realized either I wasn't a good screenwriter or I just wasn't doing the right things to get a script sold. So that's when I transferred into blog writing.
And everything's solved now, since now Obama's been president.
Yeah, racism is gone, guys.
It's not a problem anymore.
Got elected,
it's not a problem.
Yeah,
but
we're all good.
But I feel like I'm trying to have a positive view of everything that's happening in our world.
Why?
At least we're having the conversation. I'm talking about the current environment. At least we're having this conversation. Is it? I can't even imagine like what you've had to encounter in this industry. But can you just tell us what it's like? Because look, I even hate to use the term white people, because technically we're beige, but in a way, almost generic
I'm
people.
butterscotch.
Yeah, butterscotch. A butterscotch shape. But just my family is not all white. I'm from Detroit, and through marriage is all different. I have a sister who's half black. Like, it's just, I don't know. I feel like, especially if you grow up in the cities, it's no one cares. I don't think no one in this room cares.
Right.
But in the industry, there's issues.
Yeah,
that you have to encounter.
And we've seen that. I mean, obviously with the whole Oscar so white thing, and we've seen a lot of for a place that's supposed to be super liberal and super evolved as far as race goes. You would think Hollywood would be the place, but no, we're still pretty. I would even say, even though Moonlight, won last year, it was kind of, I felt like it was a gimme. It was like, you know what, we fucked up the year before by not nominating any black people, so we're gonna throw you guys this one, And I saw Moonlight, I thought it was a decent movie, but I don't even think I felt like it deserved to win, but I know that they had to kind of save face. I'm sorry, you have something?
No.
Oh, okay, I thought,
Pointed in that direction.
oh, okay, no. I felt like they were trying to save a little face. And here's the thing, I've never been one of those guys, and I hate this term so much. I hate look, there are problems, but I do believe, and I'll probably get a lot of hell for saying this, I do believe sometimes there is a race card, and it gets pulled when it shouldn't get pulled. Like, there are racial problems. Fuck yeah, there are racial problems. A lot of them. But there are times where certain battles don't need to be fought. But I think when it comes to like representation in Hollywood, that's a battle that does need to be fought. Like, I think people, not just black people, I think, Latino people, Asian people, especially, there's some amazing Asian actors who never get the credit I feel like they should get, or the roles that they should get, and they end up going to somebody else. And, again, for a place like Hollywood, why is this still happening in 2017? I really respect the actor who turned down the role in Deadpool 2. I'm sorry, Hellboy 2, or the new Hellboy.
Screen, I believe his name is?
Yeah, he turned it down because, he's a white guy, and it called for a Japanese, it should have been a Japanese actor who got the part because it's a Japanese character. He turned that role down, and honestly, I felt like, if that guy doesn't get more roles because of that, he should get praised for what he did. Because not a lot of actors will turn down a role, especially a role in a huge movie.
Yeah. The weird part is that Hollywood would hire a Korean actor for that role, and everybody would be, oh, finally, like, for fuck's sake. Like, that's the weirdest part of of Asian film, especially if you're a big fan of Chinese or Japanese, the film, the industry in those particular countries. The kind of slapdash, swap, like, it doesn't matter who, as long as he's vaguely Asian, it's the Mexicans for Native Americans thing all over again. Which was a big deal, if you have any native actors,
I'm just
I feel a little conflicted, not that particular film, but in the Ghost in the
Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah. That was a little weird situation because to most Japanese, they were not offended at all. They picked
Really?
No, because they were flattered that she's playing that character, and plus, lost in translation. I think she has a lot of credit, but it was a big issue with Asian Americans. They're sensitive because they have a history of negative portrayal and Asian Americans trying to make it. But I'm telling you, I don't think there's any Japanese born in Japan would be upset by her playing that character because it was not actually a real human. It's a robot.
Right.
So you have dogs and you name all kinds of names that.
But I think people were more offended by the fact that there are a lot of struggling Asian actors here who that role could have easily have went to.
Yeah.
But the problem is too, like, the business mind of me goes to, well, you've got to look at your bottom line. So Scarlett Johansson counts for X amount of dollars internationally.
It's also an American adaptation of an Asian piece.
Right.
So the idea is that, like, if there are tons of American versions of Chinese films, or if you go to China especially, you see their version of The Godfather, their version of an American action film, they just cast everybody as Chinese, and nobody goes, why are there no white actors playing what is effectively the Italian Godfather character in this? Because it's their industry, and there's an element of who are they selling, what's their market, who are they selling it to. There's a legit reason to just argue that this is the American version of that Japanese movie. It's not us making a Japanese movie over here, which would be arguably more offensive. Like, to the Japanese film industry.
Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that conversation, and it is almost impossible to have.
Yeah, and I think a lot of my Asian American friends, actors, I don't do any of that, but they were very upset by it. But
because they wanted the role.
It's easy to say they're scumbag for picking her, but I don't know what it is to be a producer and people actually putting money in the project. They're under enormous amount of pressure, and they're people too, and I don't have that strong feeling, but like I'm trying to put myself in their shoes too, because they have obligation to others, not just doing social justice.
Edge of Tomorrow was a manga.
Right.
It was, Live, Die, Repeat.
Yeah, the characters were Japanese.
Well, yeah, right. And the imagine if the insistence was that the Tom Cruise role and the Emily Blunt role had to be Japanese American actors because it was as a Japanese writer or producer, you finally get a Hollywood movie made.
Yeah.
Now you have to thread that needle even thinner strictly because of the origin of the country, which is arguably a form of racism in and of itself.
Yeah.
That if it's a Japanese property, it must only be done with Japanese people
Yeah.
for our market. Like, that's so awkwardly bizarre and something that's already hard to get made.
Sure.
Already
Right.
hard to do. It's Ghost in the Shell is my favorite cartoon movie of all time. It just is. And the irony is that the storyline, the concept, and like you were speaking of her being a robot, is how human are you? It's a movie about humanity that got tanked by an argument about race.
But you have to understand, though, that argument happened because there's not enough representation. I think if there was more representation,
there's an entire Japanese and an entire Chinese film market. I think the argument would be stronger for black actors in the United States, especially because there is no arguably equal African film industry. The continent of Africa, there is no,
Right.
like India has Bollywood. So there's a certain point where there are plenty of outlets for Indians in the world to have an entire, a bigger career arguably than they could have even here. Black people don't have that. That doesn't exist on the continent. And so therefore, America is really the place for black actors to come in.
I totally agree with that.
The Japanese industry is arguably, film-wise, pivotal and more important in some ways, lately, and the Chinese film market, the action film market, literally drives. We are making derivative Chinese films right now.
Only one I got mad was that stupid the Wall movie, where
the Matthew.
That's the only one made me mad, because here's a white guy that show up, and you can't find one Chinese guy with martial art. I understand they need to put a Hollywood star, but that one was. That was really ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, that I agree, but that was a Chinese production. That was a Chinese film, arguably.
Yeah. They insisted on having a white.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That wasn't Hollywood doing that. That was Golden. What was the production company on it? It wasn't.
I've always gone with the philosophy of just the best actor. To me, 1968's original Night of the Living Dead in black and white.
Sure.
George Romero had a script. But Dwayne Jones, when they cast Dwayne Jones, he's the best actor. He's going to be the lead. The script makes no reference to race at all.
It's like
they asked George Romero, "Are you going to rewrite it?" He said, "No, I'm not going to rewrite it. This is the script. This is the movie we're making. That's it. No reference to it whatsoever." I mean, it is chilling looking at It actually takes on more significance, but the fact that it's never acknowledged, I think, is the best way. So,
Ripley, in Alien,
right.
The original script, the producers apparently were on the phone with the screenwriters, going, "I might be stupid, but is Ripley male or female?" And they literally were on the phone and they shrugged at each other and went, "A woman?" And they went, "Great, okay, cool, that's fine. Moving on."
But I love that there's no, in that, gender wasn't an issue. It's just like that.
Obviously, if you make, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, the roles have to be kind of specific.
Right.
What I mean? If you write Get Out and you go, and all the white people in that town are suddenly Asian Americans.
Right.
What the fuck movie are you making now? What are you trying to say? It does matter in some cases.
Right. Or Yoshi, if you're editing or working
I'm making colors, but I'm entirely making it out of mostly heavy set rednecks.
Makes sense,
right? Yeah, the Crips and the Bloods are actually.
Or Yoshi, if you're making interracial porn, you better.
Version of Crips and Bloods.
Pakistani.
Right. Yeah. It's a different movie. Right.
This is the final thing. China have quite a bit of a human rights violation, but we want their money, so we were making more compromises.
Sure.
And like this is going to be a very tough call. Did you want to introduce the next?
Oh yeah, no, but finish. Yeah, your point.
I'm sure she wants to be a part of this.
Yeah, exactly.
As well.
Yeah. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah.
Let's introduce our final panelist.
We've already started paneling, as it were.
Yeah.
Our next guest is a leader in the Alliance of Women Directors. She's an actress, writer, producer, and director who's worked in television and film. Please welcome to the Film Threat Podcast, the fantastic Kate Rees Davies. I will be sharing the mic with you.
Yeah. So, Kate, we've been, I feel suddenly it all devolved into a conversation, which is a good thing. This is what we want. This is why we're all here. But what?
But it'd be nice to have her be a part of it. Right.
No, but I can tell from your accent, you're not from here.
No.
You must think we're all crazy now.
No.
So
the fact that you are all crazy is what brought me here. That's what I found home. Guys. Go on.
But you grew up in
Wales.
Wales, and what was that?
Tiny little country next to England. It was idyllic. It's where Tom Jones comes from. And it was very green, and I felt like I was constantly in either The Sound of Music or The Hobbit, because I read that. That was one of my first books too that I read, which I loved. And so I just had this magical childhood in my mind, which was great. And I was very dysfunctional as a child at school, always causing problems.
But isn't everyone, I think, that gets involved in this industry, there's got to be some level of dysfunction to attract you to want to work in this craziness.
Yeah, no, I was totally disruptive. And, had it not been for my drama teacher, I probably would have been on Ritalin or something like that, because borderline ADHD and all the rest of it, just constantly trying to get out of class, and causing a kerfuffle. And thankfully I did come out of school with some level of education. But yeah, and I've just always been a filmophile. I kind of grew up watching the Marx Brothers, like so many fabulous Hollywood movies. So I always had this affinity to Los Angeles and Hollywood, even though, I'd never been here. But just seeing it on screen, on the TV, and I was just like, oh my God, where is this wonderland? I have to be a part of it. So, that's it really, and that's what brought me here 8 years ago. And
I don't want to give you short shrift. I want to let our technicians know back here recording that we're going to go a little longer, maybe another 10, 15 minutes. So I think we can do that. Because the room is, I think, we'll definitely cut it off about another to 1:45 or so. But 5 minutes, okay. 5 minutes.
Well,
we're gonna power through this.
All right.
Okay.
We're gonna power through this. We can do it. But also, and I'm gonna ask you all one question.
Keep it tight.
We'll keep it tight. But so now, and you're a director, and that how getting into that, like that, and tell us in 30 seconds.
Okay. So basically, I started off my career in the film business as an actress, and I loved it. And like I say, at school, it was the drama teacher that really encouraged me to join her class, and thank God, because I really found that outlet for, that creative energy and just to expand that. And then when I was in Sydney, because that's where I studied to be an actress 10 years ago, I actually went for an audition, and the guy was like, can you direct this and kind of produce it? And I'm like, no, but I've been on enough sets, so let's give it a go. And he's like, oh, here's some money. I was like, oh, all right, yeah, I'll just do it. And I loved it so much that I was like, oh my God, yeah, directing it is, and I love them equally.
I think some of the best directors started in acting because having some empathy for the person in front of the camera, you have the insight.
With my actors, and that's the beauty of my job, and to get to direct them as well. But coming to Hollywood, I just thought, this is great. I'm going to be like working with Steven Spielberg probably by the end of the year, and came to Hollywood and realized that that's not the story. So, anywho, on a good note, things are changing a little bit for women in the business, but it needs to change a lot more. It should be 50-50, like you were saying, and I think that, there is a huge problem in this town with not only race, gender, and diversity, and like everything that you said about this crazy ass segregating in film festivals.
Yeah, I've always hated that. I've always thought that just doesn't help anyone.
And why are we even having that conversation? But problems have solutions, and I believe that, if everybody collectively and consciously change the way that they think, then this can change. However, people have said to me, oh, it's an unconscious bias. It's not unconscious, it's conscious. If you walk into a room and you are less experienced but getting the job over somebody that is more experienced because of your race, color, and gender, that's not correct in any business. So that has to change, and thankfully the ACLU has opened up their investigation with the EEOC, and it is changing. That's why the DGA just released that report that women are getting more directing roles, which I don't know how accurate.
I always feel like
is.
a necessary pushback on the argument of this, because as a member of the DGA and having sat in on the diversity panels that they've had and stuff, which I think is great work that's going forward, it needs to be done. There's a really awkward conversation as far as directors go, that there's so much. The DGA is probably pushing more for diversity than any of the unions. Period. The WGA doesn't do any of that shit. Like, it just doesn't. The DGA does. And that's great, but the voice of the film comes from the script most of the time. Mm-hmm. And women's voices in film would almost be better served, I think, to fluidly go through the screenwriting process, whereas the director hands over their gender when they're doing the project, because not all of your cast is male, not all of your cast is female, not all of your cast is adult, not all of your cast is old. Mm-hmm. Your own personality is really about the driving of the story, but not the actual performances a lot of times. And so the DGA, and it's a one-person job most of the time, especially when it's done right. So no one in the DGA, in my experience, is for diversity. They're for them getting the job every single time. No matter who the director is, they can be open. Well, I love the idea of diversity, but I want to direct that film. I want it because I have my voice. And it's an awkward, and yet the DGA is making, I think, great strides. Like I said, WGA, not so much. And that's really where the voice happens. The voice of the film, the direction of what's being told, the story. That's why I thought, like, the Wonder Woman thing, and that's an hour-long conversation.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Jesus.
Well, the thing is, it's bad practice, it's bad business practice not to hire women or diversity, because those stories are amazing, and if we had more of them, it would be way more interesting for the audience to go and see such diverse films, and from different points of view as well, from all over the world. I think that's why, world cinema is so popular. And, when you look
I think that's a way for the Hollywood to get out of jail free card is world film. When they release Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, instead of making an equivalently strong film through Asian filmmakers in the States. And that happens a lot. And Life of Pi, all these movies that get great accolades, effectively, just so that Hollywood can sidestep the fact that they're just continuing to make whatever,
But, you look at a model like Wonder Woman, which kind of made the most box office success in years for that genre. And, regardless whether it was directed by a woman or not, there was so much pressure on that film to make the money, because obviously it was directed by a woman, and it was almost like, let's see how this goes. But at the end of the day,
tell that to Penelope Spheris or any of the female directors who've been making careers forever. And I think personally, and this is me on pay, we don't have time for this, but I think Wonder Woman's the most misogynistic film made in the last 50 years.
And we'll be discussing it in a future episode of the Film Threat Podcast. Unfortunately, we do have to wrap it up because there's another podcast that's coming in here. Right. But I want to ask quickly from everyone, what was your epiphany movie? It's a movie that you saw growing up that made you fall in love with movies, that made you decide, I'm going to do that someday. I'm going to be a part of that world. What was that epiphany movie, the movie that changed your life. A lot of people, it's Star Wars. I think maybe It on television was yours, Jessica. But real quickly around, and then we'll have to wrap it up. And we thank you for letting us go a little bit longer. But we'll start with you, Kate. Your epiphany movie.
Breakfast at Tiffany's, because it was just so beautifully shot. Audrey Hepburn is just so lovely. I love the humor. I love the.
But there is one thing that's a little, especially based on the conversation we're having, the character that, his character, Mickey Rooney in it, is a little.
Who's the Asian?
You look.
Asian.
You look back at that now, and it's horrible.
Of yellow face.
It is a beautiful film.
Yeah,
It really-
except that part. That part was just irritating. It's just.
Hey, we'd just been at war. They were. It was a reaction emotionally by the entire country. Like whatever. Like you can't judge the past by today's standards, except to frustrate yourself about the potential for human growth. The truth is, in 50 years, the movies we're making right now will look like assholes, and that's how it should be.
Right.
That's how it should be.
Okay, we'll go around quickly, and then we'll wrap it up. But Yoshi,
I'm
next.
not going to do it, but one of my favorite comedy movies of all time is Taxi Driver. And the reason why is because there's a lot of funny scenes in it, actually. There's for the fact that he's trying to take the girl to the porn. But to me, the difference between a hero and a villain is timing. Because if he would have shot Palantine, he would have been a madman. But because he couldn't do it, he ended up becoming a hero. But that movie, every time I watch that movie, I see something. I learn a lot from that. So I'm not doing any of that stuff based on the movie, but yeah, I think it makes me uncomfortable. And I'll find him by that scene when he's talking to his parents, saying he's doing this amazing, wonderful thing for the government, and the camera pans away into the hallway because the conversation was so uncomfortable. Even the cameraman cannot film him talking to his parents. So there's this that movie is just amazing, and unfortunately, recent events in this country. But anyway, yeah, that movie is amazing.
For me, it was Jaws and Dirty
another
Harry.
good one.
Paranormal Activity, because I was like, Oren Peli did it on no money, and I thought it was really effective and really well done. It was the first time I realized that you don't need studio money or contacts to make a really effective, great film.
Yeah, I felt like Evil Dead 2 was definitely a turning point, for me, and just like low budget filmmaking and comedy, like high level comedy, Monty Python level stuff being made in the States. Yeah.
And for me, probably going to say Reservoir Dogs, just because I felt like, this guy had a passion, and he shot that for nothing, and I felt like if he could do it, if he could follow that dream, why can't I?
Right, which is, by the way, an adaptation of a Japanese movie.
Which, yeah, that is true.
With all Italian guys in it. Whatever, yeah.
Well, I want to thank this amazing panel. You guys were so great. A big round of applause for everyone. I want to thank the LA PodFest, Los Angeles Podcast Festival. Thank you for letting us go a little long. And let's get out of here. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.